You know you're on to something when you probably have half of probably three-quarters of the news media Googling Upton Sinclair to find out who the heck that is, first of all. Exactly. But secondly, when you've got a guy like Rand Paul and Senator Roy Blunt who have managed to figure out a way to, well, it's not really game playing as much as it is just simply an approach to common sense. And so if the Democrats worry about meat inspections, Senator Blunt, Rand Paul say, okay, we'll give you meat inspections. Just take the money from there where you're wasting. It seems pretty commonsensical to me. And Senator Blunt, when I talked about this last week, I said that's how we operate in our personal lives. When we have a problem, when we have a struggle with our budgets or whatever else, we have to cut here or figure out where we're wasting here. And if we really want to keep going out to dinner once a month, or if we really want to go to that movie, every 2 weeks, we got to figure out how to make it happen. And it's incumbent upon us and our families to do it. The government needs to operate the same way. It appears you pretty much get that.
Well, I think we all ought to get that. And frankly, I think these budget spending caps that we put into law the middle of 2011 are giving us finally the tool we need to have to make those decisions. For 6 years, Senator Reid's been the majority leader, and there's never been a single time when all the appropriations came to the floor, all the appropriations bills came to the floor. They were all voted on. In fact, for most of that time, we've been spending based on past priorities. I've talked to all these many military leaders, the heads of all of the military agencies in the last month. They all say that, yeah, sure, cutting anything is a problem. So-called line-by-line cutting, sequestration is a problem. But cutting on our old priorities is even the worst problem. What's called the continuing resolution, instead of updating your priorities. So when you're cutting what your family wanted to, the budget you had 5 years ago, you may have already built the bathroom. The money you set aside to remodel the bathroom, you don't need that column in your family budget anymore. And so we've updated in just this week the priorities that will help some. And more importantly, we need to force the government to figure out what they can do and what they must do. And one of the things that they clearly should always prioritize is public health and safety. And that's something we the Border Patrol, the Air Traffic Control Guard, the Food Safety Inspector. I had an amendment that we didn't get done because the White House just would not accept it, to where the people that have to show up if it's a bad weather day would all have to show up if anybody's working in a department in sequestration. But we're worried about, and that would include the food safety inspectors. This is a job where if the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture safety inspector, doesn't show up at meat, poultry, and egg processing facilities, nobody can work. That's 40,000 people in our state have those kinds of jobs, 500,000 people in the country. And not only would it have impacted the food supply, but for those hardworking families, that's about $400 million collectively if they all miss 11 days' work between now and the end of the year. And that's just ridiculous that the government couldn't figure out how to prioritize. And so in this area, that really has a big impact on the private sector, with Rand Paul's help and the help of about 75 of my colleagues. When we got to a final vote, we got that done.
Senator Blunt, you're making our head spin with these solutions. I don't know what you're talking about here.
Yeah, solutions in Washington, there must be something wrong.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that I'm noticing is that when it comes to the way Republicans are approaching matters, I mean, we have a lot of the Democrats talking about their assault weapon bans and talking about their sequester freakouts and a lot of these scaring people and on down the line, media or otherwise. And then we have Republicans like yourself and others who actually look like they're the serious ones. I mean, President Obama missing, not missing putting together his brackets for the NCAA, but sure as day he makes that deadline, but doesn't make the budget deadline for February. And it looks to me like if I'm a casual observer, I'm looking at Republicans and they're taking these matters seriously. I'm looking at Democrats and they're squawking about things that really don't concern a majority of us in terms of our daily lives.
Well, two big things happened this week in terms of future planning. One is the Senate, for the first time in 4 years, passed a budget. because we were able to get legislation passed that said if you don't pass a budget, you don't get paid. I sponsored that legislation with Dean Heller in the last Congress. So the passed a budget for the first time in 4 years. But the other significant thing that happened, for the first time in 100 years, the president didn't send his budget up as the leader to suggest what the country should do before the Congress was done with the budget. Both the House has passed a budget now and the Senate's passed a budget, and the president has said very publicly, I'll send my budget up after the budget discussion is over. And so that comes up now in the next few days, but it no longer matters. Why would you want to be the leader of a country if you didn't want to lead?
It seems to me that it's now become kind of fun. Because, and I'm saying this not to try to be flip, but between you and Rand Paul and some of the others, we've been struggling so much trying to reach the American people in terms of ideas, fiscal responsibility, prosperity and growth, economic freedom. And suddenly now, do you sense that people are listening? Do you sense that people are, Americans are hearing you, that you're connecting?
You know, I think this discussion that led to the sequester, the change in the law that led to the line-by-line cutting, which, by the way, Jamie, doesn't need to happen if the Congress will just appropriate below the number that the government says now is the most we can spend. You know, the thing that happened in the middle of 2011 was we did 10 years of this is the most you can spend in any of these years in the discretionary side of the budget. And if you don't exceed that number, there's no line by line cutting. And if the Congress would just do that job, so I think this has forced us back into what should be the normal way of doing business, which is the appropriations committees meet, they pass a bill, it goes to the floor, it's amended in the Senate as long as anybody has the interest, and the House generally too. This is the one thing that's sort of open for all amendments. And you have to find the money in the budget you have to say, okay, I want to take this money from this column and put it in this column. So it is a series of decisions, and then that's how you fund the government. And I think this gets us back to that. And frankly, I think the president really overplayed his hand. The White House tours, the letting people who were being held as illegally in the country go because you didn't want to transfer money from $600 from one column to another to keep those people in custody. I just think they've overdone it, and people quickly got onto that. People are a lot smarter than a lot of people in Washington think they are.
I'd say. All right.
Allman in the morning. Common Sense Radio.
Senator Blunt's going to stick around. We're going to talk a little bit about immigration. We're going to talk about the future of the conservative movement, Rand Paul, and all the rest. It's Common Sense Radio. Everybody's asking about the roads. They're fine. I mean, it snowed like heck yesterday, but the roads are good, aren't they, Senator? You guys
They are. I think they're good. It was a beautiful day, though. It's a beautiful snow this time of year always, because, one, you know it's not going to be there for very long.
Right.
And it was very pretty snow.
The weather people are all so happy because they were right. They're like, because nobody believed
just
what
the
they
law
were
of
saying.
averages finally caught up with
Exactly, yeah. Like, yes, we're right. Because all of us were like, well, it's going to rain. It's not going to snow.
You know, the Washington weather people are just terrible. And a couple of weeks ago, we almost shut down Washington for the snowstorm that didn't happen.
Yeah, right.
We called it the Snowquester.
Yeah, right. I remember that. Hey, guess what? Okay, did you know that you were in our brackets for the conservative face of the future, Senator?
No.
Well, you actually were up against Mitch McConnell.
How did I do against Mitch?
Oh, you beat him. You're on to this. You're on to the next round. Although I think it's unfair because now you're up against Rand Paul.
Oh,
I mean, and I think you guys of late have been two peas in a pod. To tell you the truth.
I think somebody seeded that bracket pretty tough for me.
I know. I think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's. I'd rather have you both move on. To tell you the truth. We'll have to figure that out.
Well, if I have to beat by somebody in the conservative bracket, I can't really argue much about being beaten by Rand Paul.
Well, what's it like working with him? Do you sense that he's got giving conservatives some degree of broad appeal? I mean, I think obviously I was proud that he mentioned your name when he was talking about righteousness and common sense. So I was glad about that.
That was good. You know, he is actually a good guy to work with, and worked it with his dad in the house, and Rand has a different skill set than his dad had, but probably a lot of the same values. But he knows how. He's a communicator in ways that his dad wasn't, and he has that base that his dad did so much to create. And that's a pretty significant combination, I think. The issue of drones, I raised this 2 years ago when General Petraeus, in a public hearing, and I was the only member of the Senate that was talking about it then, what about the use of these drones, and do we really understand what our policy is? And, my concern at the time and since then has been, without a interrogation policy, without a detention policy, both of which get you a lot of information, I have some reason to believe that there's a default position, which is, well, we're going to get anything from this guy anyway, so we're not going to ask him any questions, and we're not going to hold on to him in a way that's not true. Let's just eliminate him. There may be times when the only thing to do is to eliminate one of our enemies, but if you can capture an enemy and get his computer, find the people that are with him, find the files, have a chance then to ask him questions, even if you don't happen to capture him and you get all the stuff he has with him, that's a bigger deal than blowing all that up. So I was concerned about that 2 years ago. I thought Rand asked a lot of very good questions, and at the end of the day, the White House, at least for things that could happen in this country, took a pretty firm position, which is, well, you're right, we don't have the authority to do that here. There are times when you probably should do it overseas. I think this administration has overdone it because they don't know what to do with anybody when they get a hold of them.
Right. Where do you stand on the immigration issue right now?
What I've said in this studio many times in the last several years is there are really three problems here. One is you need to secure the border. Two is what are the legitimate workforce needs of the country? And three is what do you do with people who came here illegally or stayed illegally? About half the people that are here without documents came with documents and just stayed rather than take a chance. So, I've also said that if you could solve that first problem, I think actually the second two are pretty easy to resolve. People will do the fair thing on the second two. What are the legitimate workforce needs of the country, and what do you do with people who came here or stayed here illegally? That's much easier to solve if you could convince people that you really had operational control of the border and that this problem wasn't just going to get bigger and bigger, but now you had a finite universe of problems that you want to solve. I hope we can get there. And I think no matter what anybody else is saying, they're all saying that you've got to have operational control of the border, though, depending on who's saying it, they either emphasize that or just kind of mumble through it and then saying, here's what we should do after we have control of the border. The border doesn't have to be absolutely secure, just like the bank is not absolutely secure, but it's secure enough I put what little money I have there.
Yeah, that's an important point you bring out about half the people overstaying, and also to those who
they overstay a long time. I don't want to suggest they're just here visiting and stay an extra 2 weeks. These are people who come in on some kind of visa, and then they really like it.
Yeah, right.
And they really don't want to go back, and so they just don't go back, and we don't have a very good reporting system on whether you're still here or not, even if you came in legally.
Senator Blunt, great to see you. Thanks for everything, my friend.